where we think they're going to go. I guess the first and most obvious domino to fall in the quarterback market is Kirk Cousins. So where is Kirk Cousins going to land up?
Yeah, definitely. I think all other free agent quarterback decisions will wait until after Kirk Cousins lands. Even potentially some draft trades and things like that may get held up by, does Minnesota keep him therefore they stick at 11, try to add more talent? Do they let him go and then maybe they become one of the hot names as a trade up candidate? So I'll say this: you try not to do full-on conspiracy theory, each offseason when things happen. But I've made this kind of analogy before, where when Kevin Dotson went from Pittsburgh to the Los Angeles Rams, it probably should have raised our antennas a little bit that maybe Sean McVay is going to change what he does on offense, because philosophically, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense for an under center, wide zone, play action type approach to bring in this kind of big gap inside zone scheme player in Kevin Dotson. And sure enough, they changed their approach to the run game. So when Arthur Smith went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, now tying it back to Pittsburgh, look, can he change his philosophy? Sure. Can the Pittsburgh Steelers change their entire offense? Sure. But you look at the differences between what Arthur Smith has historically done and what the Steelers have done on offense the last couple of years, even just looking at the 3 years of Matt Canada and Arthur Smith, you're talking about like a team that is 56% of their runs are outside zone, the most in the NFL by 16%. The Steelers were 24th. You look at play action rate, the Falcons were second. The Steelers were, I think, dead last. Like I can name 10 more stats of just like schematically what they do, but even just personnel. The amount of 12 personnel in Atlanta was sky high. Pittsburgh wasn't that high. They did draft Darnell Washington, maybe want to do more of that, but to me, it just, Ryan Tannehill's the easier connection because of the Tennessee days with them too. But I also wonder if they sit there and say, look, we've gone 9-8, 10-7 a bunch of years in a row with, frankly, replacement level quarterback play, below average, no question about it. And, Cam Hayward's going to be 35, I think, next year. TJ Watt's going to be 30. I'm sure he'll be good for several more years. But maybe they just say, you know what, let's just like make a bit of a splash. Go get Kirk Cousins, and we think we can win a couple playoff games with, everything the same, but then you add in, a clear upgrade at quarterback. So I think Pittsburgh becomes fascinating there. He's a fit. And like I said, Arthur Smith can change. I'm not saying he can't, but what he does historically and what Kenny Pickett and this offense has done, not the same thing in any way, shape, or form. So that one jumps out there. And the Atlanta Falcons, where Arthur Smith comes from, of course, still makes a ton of sense in my eyes. You have, Raheem Morris bringing PFF Zach Robinson over. They can cater an offense around Kirk Cousins, no question. Their old coworker and Kevin O'Connell obviously loves him in Minnesota. Would probably have, rave things to say about him. And of course, they know what that offense looks like. So those two spots to me, if he doesn't stay in Minnesota, I think just jump up. You have Atlanta picking 8th. Pittsburgh's way down there, 20 something. So they don't have really a draft option. I think if he leaves, I think he goes to one of those two teams.
If you were handicapping it, what is the chances of Minnesota versus those teams? Like, how likely is it that he does leave? Because I would say when it was being talked about Bill Belichick going to Atlanta, I think Kirk would have dropped everything to work with Bill Belichick. Like, he would have loved that as a concept. That man wants to surround himself with the best at all times. He wants to pick the brains of those guys. You watch him on the Manning cast, it's like him interviewing them more than them interviewing him. Cousins just wants to be around those people to be the best quarterback that he could be. I think he would have taken less money, frankly, to go to Atlanta and work with Bill Belichick. Obviously, that's not the way they went. They went with Raheem Morris and then Zach Robinson coming in as the offense coordinator. I don't see that as attractive to Kirk Cousins. Like, I think it's like, yeah, I love Minnesota. It's great. I got the house here. I got the family here. But I would drop all of that in a heartbeat to go work with Bill Belichick, the greatest coach of all time. Would I drop it all in a heartbeat to go work with PFF Zach and Raheem Morris in Atlanta? Maybe. But they'd have to pony up some serious cash for that because the Vikings are probably going to pay me pretty well.
Yeah, true. And Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips, so a lot of connections there. So to me, here's how I look at it. I know Kevin O'Connell probably wants to bring him back. They probably say, look, we won 13 games the year before. He obviously started 0-4 this year, but they were clearly riding the ship and playing good football before Kirk Cousins unfortunately gets hurt. But I come back to, they've done these, Band-Aid 1 year, 2 year extensions off of the original deal to always get out of ahead of the fact that they cannot tag him. He's virtually untaggable. And this year they made a conscious decision. We're going to let him enter a true contract year. 1 year, I think it was $35 million. You do that, so you take on that risk, and then gonna be 36-year-old Kirk Cousins tears his Achilles. Like, if that's not your exit valve to where you say, all right, we're going to pivot to the future. Justin Jefferson's about to be making $30+ million a year. We got to pay some, maybe Christian Darrisaw soon, maybe Danielle Hunter, figure a lot of other things out. If we also still have the expensive quarterback, we're just sticking in purgatory. And I like Kirk Cousins. Like they'll be a playoff team, but I think it might be a battle between coaching staff and front office, frankly, but I just don't know why you would open the door to that, potential, and then you feel the need to spend because he has no tag, but like he has as much leverage over Minnesota as a free agent team, right? Like it's not like it's a different scenario. So I still probably would say Minnesota's like minus 120, whatever. Like I'd still make them the favorite, but not a heavy favorite by any means, because I read so much into the fact that they did not extend him before 2023.
Yeah, I forget where I saw it, but I think I saw somewhere saying that like he was asking for like a 2-year deal of like $95 million or something for the Vikings. So like a 45+ million a year deal for 2 years to tie him back down to Minnesota. I kind of feel like that makes sense for both sides. Like Cousins is always one of these, short, fully guaranteed deals that puts him back on the market and keeps his contract pace with, the higher paid guys. And from Minnesota's point of view, if you can't get the next guy, like if you can't work out a trade to get to 1 or 2 or whoever you like at the top of the draft, you're not going to do better than getting Cousins, even if it is giving him a decent chunk of money, and $45 million a year, it's not that much anymore. Like I kind of feel like that's a fair deal for both sides.
I would just say, so his first extension in 2020 was 2 years, 66. Did get a slight pay bump in 2022 to a 1-year, $35 million deal that he played on this past season. I think we have a little bit kind of ignored age sometimes because of the Tom Brady's of the world. Like I said, it's a 36-year-old, already not very mobile Kirk Cousins coming off a torn Achilles. So I wouldn't pay. If I'm Minnesota, again, like in different scenario, maybe I would. If I'm Minnesota, I'm just like, all right, we're giving him, again, like I said, I'm not saying it's a bad deal in a vacuum. Like he's worth more than, $5 million more than Daniel Jones. No one's arguing that. But the downside risk there to me is exorbitant, where maybe he struggles a little bit out of the gate because of health. He's already old, and you're guaranteeing at least 1.5, if not just the entire 2 years. You might sink the entire operation. And then you're just sitting there and it's like, all right, we're not going to be relevant at all until 2026. So I do hear what you're saying. Like there are certainly arguments in that favor as well. To me, I just say come back on a similar deal. My projection, I know it's too low, but I have 2 years, 60 with way less guarantees than he's ever had on a contract in recent years. That is more of the go back to Minnesota to try to kind of finish this thing out. And obviously he goes back and does he bangs the drum before the game with him and his son popping their tops off. And like, there's clearly a lot of love there, whenever your tarp's off in the stadium. But it's just a clean exit for me. So I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be fascinating. He's going to take the tour, I'm sure. Go get courted by a bunch of different suitors. And yeah, we know how quarterback works in this league. Someone's going to pony up and pay him a lot of money.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where Minnesota are on this in terms of they really, really want him back and only could turn to other options as a last resort, or like they would quite like him back, but actually they're focusing on moving up to the top of this draft, and Kirk Cousins is almost the fallback. Like they're in this weird position now where which is your priority? Do you want to push hard at getting Cousins back because he's good in this system and you've got receivers and this could be a really good offense, or do you want to say, look, we've been messing around with this Cousins thing for a while. We did put a stop date on it. This is the stop date. It's time to stop and go hard at something else. So one of the most interesting storylines, I think, of the offseason